Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video. Back on the E36 today. Obviously, the last video, we went ahead and got the engine installed, engine and transmission installed, which was a huge leap forward in the progress of getting this car ready for the track. Still have a ton of work left to do. With that said, today we're going to be installing the E36 M3 rear end. So obviously we have our subframe with the rev shift mounts, the differential right here with the rev shift mounts, the trailing arms with the brand new bearings installed, everything. So really it's just a matter of getting that old rear end out today and the new one put in. So enough talking, let's get into it. Before we can drop the subframe, we need to disconnect the parking brake cables from the parking brake handle. Now you've seen me pull this out. Well, that was broken from last year. And these cables just slide right out. They're held in with a 12mm nut and a 9mm jam nut. So pretty straightforward in terms of how they go into place. But like I said, you want to remove the parking brake cable from the parking brake handle as opposed to from the trailing arm, because they're usually seized in the trailing arm. Another issue I've run into is these brake line junctions right here. I was able to get this one loose. Obviously you can see there's some corrosion on those. The one on the other side will not come loose, but what I've done instead is I just removed the caliper, disconnected the hose from the caliper, and I have it draining right now. But this side I can get loose, and so therefore it'll come out relatively easily. You have some electrical connectors. You have your ABS wheel speed sensor connector, your differential speed sensor, which is on the back here. You need to disconnect that. But other than that, once you have all that stuff disconnected, all you do is unbolt the shock absorber. That's an 18mm bolt. You remove that, and then there's only four. There's two bolts in the rear, one there, and another one there. And then you have these two nuts towards the forward position, which are on studs. But once you've released all of that, it should just drop right out for you. So I'm going to look into just disconnecting all of these electrical connectors first. And then once those are done, we'll start to drop the subframe. And the goal here is to drop it out in one piece, and then I'll assemble a new one to put into position. So that's the plan for now. See how that works out. Woo! That's why I stayed back for that. Next up, 3 18mm bolts. These hold the trailing arm mount bracket to the trailing arm pocket. These can sometimes be a real pain in the ass to open. There it goes. So on the left-hand side, it's going to be the wheel speed sensor. On the right-hand side, it's going to be a wheel speed sensor and pad wear sensor. Come on. There it is. We drop the subframe. This will just be left hanging, which is totally fine. It's not a problem. And then our last connection is the wheel speed sensor. It's located in the rear diff, so just a matter of disconnecting this, which might be a pain to remove. Nope, just depress the ears on the connector. Should come loose. And then there's like a wire retainer on the diff cover. We're just gonna pull the wire out of that, and then we should be ready to pull this. All these bolts or nuts and bolts they're 18 mil. I'm not sure what you'll be able to see. It's kind of hard to get a camera angle for it. It's hard to tell, but it looks like I might be actually pulling the bolt out of the frame of the car as opposed to the nut backing out. We'll have to see, but either way, it's not a problem. If the bolt is physically spinning and it's not the sleeve, which is what it feels like, it's fine. Yep. So all of these have broken free, which is great. We go to a smaller ratchet now. Oops. Going the wrong way. I don't want to do that. Oh, that bolt is very clean. That's awesome. Which you would kind of expect. You would hope that corrosion or moisture and other stuff wouldn't make its way up there, but you never know. So that bolt is very, very clean. Good stuff. I'm going to do some loose assembly of the rear subframe assembly. First, I'm going to do the upper wishbones, which these house the coil spring. Now, there is a left and a right. The way that you know is basically the offset of the bushing. The offset of the bushing will always be facing towards the rear of the subframe. Even though these rearward bolts are coated, I'm still going to put some of this copper anti-seize on it, because this is what sits in the sleeve, and I don't want any opportunity for it to start bonding with the centering sleeve of the bushing. So just doing this as a precaution. Perfect. I'm going to go do the other side. Awesome. So the threads are started on the nuts for the studs in the front and the bolts in the rear. So go ahead and draw it in. I haven't torqued the control arms. The problem is I want to do it at ride height. I do have access to get to the nut on this backside and that side as well. So what I'll probably end up doing is I'll pop the springs in here and I'll load up the suspension, and then I'll torque these with the spring in place, because that will simulate where the ride height is roughly going to be. All of the other bolts don't have any kind of accessibility problem like the upper bolts do. So I'm going to torque the ride height on this first, and then I'll install everything else, and then the last thing that'll go will be the differential, because otherwise I don't have access to the heads of the bolts. So that'll be the last thing, is putting the differential in. All right, the subframe is in. The bolts and fasteners are torqued. So next, I want to get these upper control arms torqued at ride height, and the way that I'm going to do that is I'm just going to set the spring inside like there. I'm going to use the floor jack to bring the control arm up into, call it into the predetermined ride height. I'm not looking to get this dead spot on, but I just want some load on that bushing for when we torque it. I think that's going to be decent right there. It's an 18 millimeter nut and an 18 millimeter bolt. Torque is 77 Newton meters. Since we've preloaded that bushing, let's watch what happens when I take load off the suspension. So I'll bring the floor jack down. You get some droop, but other than that, it's exactly in the position that it needs to be. Okay, like I was saying, now it's exactly in the position that it needs to be in for when we install the actual complete suspension. The purpose behind preloading the suspension is so that the bushing is never in a bind, right? So if you torque it at ride height, that would be no load on the bushing whatsoever. That's going to keep the bushing from failing. However, I might come back to this at a later date and put spherical bushings in there. I do not know yet, but that's my way of getting around this, because like I said, there is no other way to gain access to the nut on the back. I mean, you can just kind of see it right there, but you know, once you install axles and all this other stuff, there's no way that you're getting access to it. So I do this first, put all the other stuff in, and then you're pretty much good to go from that point forward. It's getting a little bit late, starting to get dark. I got a lot of stuff I got to clean up. I'm going to be back at this tomorrow, so we're going to call this part one of installing the E36 M3 rear end. I could have gotten more done today, however, I ended up driving down to work to pick up my tap and die set, which I should have packed when I came home for the weekend, but I didn't, and that kind of held me up today. So, you know, the thing is, with any project like this, you never know what the hell you're going to run into. So that took 2 hours out of the day, and I started a little bit late too. But anyway, part one of the video. Part two, we're going to completely assemble everything else. We're going to get the axles in, we're going to get the trailing arms in, all that other stuff. So lots more to come. You know, like always, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. If you want to see more videos like this, like I said, plenty more on the way. Hit the like button. You can follow me along on Instagram. My username is in the description below. Other than that, thank you for watching, and I'll see you for the next one.